Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha Shmos. We're going to do Os Tes Zion, and in the sefer that's Daf Tuf Kuf Dalid. And before we start, I just want to ask everyone to please have in mind several names for a refuah shlema. Dina Ita Bas Chaya Sarah, Ephraim Noam Ben Miriam, and Mandi Esther Bas Elka Rochel. So we're going to have those names in mind for refuah shlema. And then also one more name, have in mind that this person should stay safe and healthy. The name is Ayelet Basha Bas Shoshana Malka. Before we start looking at the Zera Shimshon himself, we're going to take a look at three psukim. These are the last three psukim in Parsha Shmos, and seeing these psukim will help us understand the issues that the Zera Shimshon is going to raise and discuss. So this is Perek Hey and Sefer Shmos, starting with Pasuk Chaf Beis. And again, last three psukim in Sefer in Parshas Shmos. Vayoshav Moshe el Hashem vayomar, and Moshe returned to Hashem and he said, Hashem, lama hariosa la'am hazeh. Why are you doing bad things to this people? Lama zeh shelachtani. Why did you send me? And I should have mentioned these psukim are coming after Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron first went to Paro and said, Hashem has sent us to tell you that it's time to send out the Jewish people and have them be able to have a chag in the midbar. And Paro said, why are you trying to get the people to stop doing their work? And from now on, they're going to have to make the bricks without the teven, without the straw. So Moshe, it seems from the psukim, was obviously very disappointed and even shocked that his intercession with Paro led to the Jewish people's increased suffering. And not only did it not result in the Jewish people being allowed to leave, but it resulted in their servitude becoming harsher. So Moshe, this pasuk now captures Moshe's feelings and saying to Hashem, Lama hariosa lama zeh, why are you making it even worse for these people? Next pasuk, ume'oz basi el Paro ledaber bishmecha, and from when I first came to Paro to speak in your name, heira la'am hazeh, he has made it worse for this people. Vehatzel lo hitzalta es amecha, and you, Hashem, have not rescued the people. You have not saved the people, as if to say, Hashem, you sent me on a mission to save them and rescue them and redeem them and take them out, and that's not what's happening here. It's actually getting worse. Last pasuk in Parsha Shmos. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, and Hashem said to Moshe, Atah sireh, now you will see, Asher e'eseh leFaro, that which I am going to do to Pharaoh, ki v'yad chazoka yishalchem, because with a strong hand he will send them out, uveyod chazaka, and with a strong hand, yigarshem me'artzo, he will chase them out, he will drive them out from his land. So those are the psukim, and now let's get right into the text, into the Zera Shimshon, again, Os Tes Zion. Medrash Rabbah, the Medrash Rabbah says, Al pasuk atah sireh asher e'eseh leFaro, that's the pasuk that we just read. The pasuk says that Hashem responded to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, now you will see that which I am going to do to Paro. So the Medrash Rabbah comments, B'milchemes Paro atah roeh, in the war with Paro, in the struggle against Paro, you will see, Ve'ein atah roeh b'milchemes lamed aleph malachim, but you will not see the war against the 31 kings. That's a reference to the battles in the land of conquering the land of Canaan. And those battles were, of course, led by Yehoshua, who took over after Moshe Rabbeinu's death. He took over the leadership of the Jewish people, led them into Eretz Canaan, and led them in battle against the 31 Canaanite kings. And so Hashem says to Moshe, you're going to see what happens with Paro and how Paro is defeated, but you're not going to see the battles and wars, the successful battles and wars against the Canaanite kings. So the Zera Shimshon says, V'hu and this is difficult to understand. Ma inyan zeh lazeh. The first of the three questions that the Zera Shimshon asks is, what connection is there between these two things? What connection does the Medrash Rabbah see between the struggle and the battles against Paro and later on, 40 years later, the battles against the 31 kings, that it has this connection, that it seems to be saying there's a connection and a parallelism between the two, that Moshe will see the first, but not the second. So what is there? Why we would never think to connect those things? What's the connection? The Ode, in another question, this is his second question, Mahu haloshen shel milchama. What is this language that the Medrash Rabbah uses of war? The nokat milchemes paro, that it specifically calls the struggle against Paro the war of Paro. In the Torah itself, it doesn't generally refer to a war. And of course, what happened between the Jewish people and Paro is not really, doesn't fit the normal definition of a milchama, of a war, where you have two sides fighting against each other. Here, you have Paro, who had all the power, enslaving and persecuting and oppressing the Jewish people who had no power. And even when the Jewish people left, it wasn't a war. They didn't have weapons to fight against Paro and to defeat him in battle. They left because of the Makos and because of Hashem persuading Paro, so to speak, that it was in his interest, in his country's interest, to send the Jews out. And that's what happened here. There was no real war between the Bnei Yisrael and Mitzrayim. So why does the Medrash Rabbah use the phrase Milchemes Paro, the war of Paro, or the war against Paro? V'loma dafka ataroa. And the third question is, why specifically does the Medrash Rabbah talk about you will see? That Hashem says to Moshe, you will see what happens to Paro, but you will not see what happens to the kings, the Canaanite kings. The Zera Shimshon apparently feels that seeing is not the most apt expression, or not the expression that we would expect. You might expect to say, Moshe, you will lead the Jews out of Egypt. You will lead the Jews against Paro, but you will not lead them in the wars against the 31 kings, or you will experience these things. But why dafka the lashon of roa, of seeing what Moshe? Why does it focus on what Moshe will see and what Moshe won't see? So those are the three questions, and the Zera Shimshon, as is his custom, is going to develop a theme and some ideas, and then he's going to use them to answer these questions. So let's move to the second paragraph. V'yesh lomar, and as a first step, we can say the b'medrash hanizkar la'el, and another piece of the medrash, another section of the Medrash Rabbah, which the Zera Shimshon has already mentioned previously in a previous section, al pasuk hakodem, on the previous pasuk, lama hariosa la'am hazeh, on the words that Moshe says to Hashem, why have you made it even worse for these people? So the Zera Shimshon says, Matzinu, we find in the Medrash Rabbah, shetar omes Moshe, that Moshe's complaint, Hoya, was, manish tana ha'am hazeh mishar umos ha'olam. What is different about the Jewish people from all of the rest of the nations of the world, shenishtabe begolas Mitzrayim, that the Jews, of all the people in the world, the Jews were enslaved and oppressed in the land of Egypt. And if you look at that piece in the Medrash Rabbah, Moshe had a very specific point to make, a very specific complaint, or a very specific question that he was asking Hashem. And that was, according to the Medrash Rabbah, Moshe said, I have studied the events of Sefer Bereshis, and I see that people who committed, generations of people who committed terrible sins were punished. For example, the Dor HaMabul, the generation of the flood, they did terrible acts that the Torah describes of their corruption and their violence, and they were punished with the flood. The Dor HaFlaga, the generation of the dispersion, committed Averos, and so they were punished. And the people of Sodom, as another example, did all kinds of terrible things to other people, to visitors, and to travelers, and so they were wiped out. But Moshe Rabbeinu says the particular generation of Bnei Yisrael, that was living in Egypt and was enslaved by Paro, they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't commit such terrible, heinous acts and sins that would justify them being enslaved and suffering this terrible suffering of servitude. So Moshe says, where are the sins of this generation of Jews that are suffering and being enslaved in Egypt that would justify them being given this terrible punishment of enslavement? That was Moshe's question, according to the Medrash Rabbah, when Moshe said, Lama hareosa lama zeh, why are you causing the Jewish people to suffer? Ve'imishum ki ger yezaracha v'chulei. And Moshe Rabbeinu continues, and if Hashem, you say, it's because of the pasuk, it's because of the discussion that you had back with Avram Avinu, in which you told him that his descendants would be enslaved, they would be strangers in a foreign land, and they would ultimately be enslaved there and suffer there. If that's what this is about, then Esav and Yishmael, who also were descendants of Abraham, of course, Yishmael was a son of Abraham and Esav was a grandson of Abraham, their descendants should also have been enslaved in some foreign land. If all of this that the Jewish people are suffering isn't based on their own sins, and again, specifically the generation that was in Egypt at Moshe's time, if their suffering and enslavement wasn't based on their own sins, and it all stemmed back to the pasuk and the nevuah, the prophecy that Hashem gave to Avram Avinu about his descendants, then that should have applied to the children of Esav and Yishmael as well. But of course it didn't. We have no record, we have no evidence in the Torah that says that the children of the descendants of Esav and Yishmael had to undergo anything at all, any kind of enslavement at all, that might be compared or similar to what the Jewish people experienced in Mitzrayim. V'ayin sham, and look there in the Medrash Rabbah. V'yodua, and now the Zera Shimshon gives us his first yesod, his first principle that's important for us to know, that he wants us to know. V'yodua, and it is known, shematnas Eretz Yisrael, that the gift of Eretz Yisrael, lo ba'ali Yisrael, did not come, the gift of having Eretz Yisrael and possessing it did not come to the Jewish people, ella al yedei, except through the fact, shesavlu ol hagolus b'Mitzrayim, that they underwent the suffering, the burden of the exile in Egypt. So the Zera Shimshon says, the only reason, the thing we need to understand about the Jewish people ultimately conquering and taking possession of Eretz Yisrael as a gift from Hashem, that only happened because of the suffering that the Jewish people and the enslavement that the Jewish people underwent in Mitzrayim. V'chein Pirish Rashi, and similar to this idea, Rashi explains, al pasuk vayelech al Eretz, on a pasuk regarding Esav, where the Torah says that Esav left the land of Canaan and he went to a different land, mipnei Yaakov achiv, because of Yaakov, his brother. So the Torah says that Esav left Eretz Canaan because of Yaakov. So now Rashi, on that pasuk, Rashi explains, mipnei shtar chov, because of the debt, so to speak, that was owed, shel gezeras, because of the decree of Hashem, ki ger yezaracha, your children will be strangers and be oppressed in a foreign land. Hamutal, this gezerah, this decree was placed al zaro shel Yitzchak, on the children of Yitzchak, right? Esav knew about the prophecy that Hashem had conveyed to Avram Avinu about ki ger yezaracha, your children, your future descendants will go into exile in a foreign land and be enslaved and suffer there. Esav knew about that. And that's considered the shtar chov. That's a debt that the Jewish people owed, meaning they had to undergo what Hashem predicted would happen. And Esav knew that would apply to him, just like it applied to the descendants of Yaakov. Omar, so Esav said, Elech li mikan, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to leave the land of Canaan. Ein li chelek b'matana, and I will not have, I concede that I will have no portion of the gift, shenitna lo ha'aretz hazos, that Yaakov will be given this land of Eretz Canaan and his descendants, v'lo b'piron hashtar, and I also will have no part of having to pay back the debt, meaning Esav's reasoning was, and this is actually what happened, if I leave Eretz Canaan and I forego and give up any claim to the land of Canaan, then my children, my descendants will not have to be enslaved and will not have to suffer. They will be excluded, just like they're going to be excluded from a nachal, an inheritance in the land of Eretz Yisrael. They will also be excluded from the suffering in Mitzrayim that Hashem predicted. And so Esav left. That's why Esav left, and that's what that pasuk means, that Esav left because of Yaakov. Esav left because he knew what was going to happen to the descendants of Yaakov. Ad kan Lashono, until here is a quote from Rashi. Ve'im kain, and if so, ein mokum klal, there's no reason at all, l'shibud b'nei Esav v'Yishmael, for the descendants of Esav and Yishmael to have been enslaved. There would be no reason for that. She'ein lahem chelek ba'aretz, because they were not destined to have any portion of the land of Eretz Canaan that became Eretz Yisrael. Because they were not going to be given a claim on land in Eretz Yisrael, therefore they did not have to undergo the suffering that only the Bnei Yisrael, the sons of Yaakov, not Esav, underwent. So the Zera Shimshon in this paragraph, let's just pause for a moment, has put down for us, has laid out for us the first building block, so to speak, which is the connection between the suffering, the shibud in Mitzrayim, and the ultimate inheritance of the land, conquering and taking over the land of Eretz Yisrael. And the connection is a very clear one, a very direct one. Without the shibud, without the suffering and enslavement in Egypt, the Jewish people would not have merited to receive Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, it only applied to the Jewish people. It didn't apply to the descendants of Esav and Yishmael, who we might have thought should have been included in this pasuk, in this prophecy that Hashem gave to Abraham about his descendants. And we might have thought that would have included Esav and Yishmael as well. But because they did not inherit Eretz Yisrael, they did not have to undergo the suffering of the Shibud Mitzrayim. Now, keep that principle in mind, and let's continue. V'kosha al Moshe. It's difficult to understand about Moshe. Lama nisraim b'chinam. Why did he raise a complaint? Meaning when he said, Hashem, lama hariosa, why are you doing bad things to the Jewish people? Why did Moshe raise that complaint? B'chinam, for apparently no reason. Umikol shkein, certainly, shekodam lachein, before Moshe ever got to the point of saying this to Hashem, Gilalo HaKadosh Baruch Hu davar zeh. Hashem had already revealed this to him. V'omer, and Hashem said to Moshe, Ele eschem me'oni Mitzrayim. I am going to bring you up. I'm going to bring the Jewish people up from the suffering in Egypt, v'chulei, etc. El eretz zavas chalavu devash, to a land flowing with milk and honey. Klomar. What does that pasuk mean to say? What did that really mean? What was Hashem really communicating to Moshe at that point? Masha anisi osam begolos Mitzrayim. The fact that I am allowing the Jews to be oppressed and suffering in the land of Egypt, lo hayakiim l'tovosam. It is only for their ultimate benefit. In order that they will be able to inherit this beautiful land, this wonderful land of Eretz Yisrael. Ve'im Moshe nisra'im, and if Moshe nonetheless complained, meaning if Moshe, after already having been told by Hashem that the suffering in Mitzrayim would enable the Jewish people to ultimately go to Eretz Yisrael and inherit that land for all of the future, for the future generations of Bnei Yisrael. If Moshe knew that, and nonetheless he still complained and said, Loma hariosa, why are you making the Jewish people suffer? Tzarech lomar, we must say, shedato hayasa, that Moshe's view was, she'ein ha'aretz kol kach ru'uya v'chashuva, that the land of Eretz Canaan was not so fitting and so important, lispol aleha, to undergo because of it, toreach shibud kazeh, the terrible burdens and suffering of the enslavement in Egypt. Ve'af al pi shehi, and even though it, meaning Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Tova, even though Moshe, of course, conceded and knew, because Hashem said it and described it as a good land. So Moshe, according to the Zera Shimshon, his mind frame, his thought process was, of course, I understand there's this place called Eretz Yisrael, and it's a good land, it's an Eretz Tova, right? Nonetheless, it can't possibly be so special and so good that it would justify the suffering of the Jewish people that they're undergoing in Mitzrayim. The Im Kain, and if so, if that was really Moshe's thought process and his understanding, his perspective, Moshe pogam bechashivos haaretz chas v'shalom, then Moshe was detracting from the importance of the land of Eretz Yisrael, God forbid. So the Zera Shimshon is saying we have a problem here because it looks like, and according to the Zera Shimshon, tzarech lomar, he used that language, it looks like we're compelled to say, we have to say the only way to understand what's going on here is if Moshe Rabbeinu heard from Hashem that the servitude in Egypt is the only, undergoing that experience was the only way the Jewish people, Bnei Yisrael, were going to merit getting Eretz Yisrael. And nonetheless, Moshe says to Hashem, and right here in the Psukim at the end of Parsha Shmot, Lama Hariosa, why are you doing these bad things to the Jewish people? Why are you making them suffer? So that means that Moshe, taking into account what Hashem said, was still asking on Hashem and saying, it's not worth it. The suffering is too great to justify the benefits of Eretz Yisrael. So the Zera Shimshon says, could that be? Could it be that Moshe Rabbeinu truly didn't grasp, truly didn't understand the benefits to the Jewish people of inheriting the land of Eretz Yisrael and how important that is for the future of the Jewish people? Could it possibly be that he didn't grasp that idea fully? And the Zera Shimshon is saying, well, it must be that that's the case, because otherwise his question to Hashem, his taromes, his complaint to Hashem, his taina against Hashem, so to speak, doesn't make sense, can't be understood. So now let's go further. Umishum hachi, and because of this, Amar lo, Hashem said to Moshe, Ata sira v'chule. Now you will see milchemes paro ataroeh. Now you will see the war against Paro, ve'ein ataroeh v'chule, but you will not see the battles of the kings of Eretz Canaan. Meaning Hashem is saying, if that's your question and you don't appreciate fully the benefits of Eretz Yisrael for the Jewish people to own it, to conquer it, to inherit it, then you won't be zochet to go into the land and participate and lead the Jewish people in those battles. Klomar, this means to say, halo minhag ha'olam hu, it is the custom of the world, it is the natural course of the world. She'im am echad, if one people, one nation, o melech echad, or one king, yirtze lichbosh medina achas, if one king or one nation wants to conquer another people, another nation, tzarech sheyasa imo milchama. The first nation who wants to conquer the second nation has to go to war. You have to, that's how people don't just give up and say, here, take our land. You have to fight against them. You have to conquer them. B'tzar gadol, and that involves great suffering. When you go to war against another nation, even if you're victorious in the war, you're going to have losses and suffering, terrible losses and suffering to conquer, go to war and conquer another people and take their land. V'kan, and here Yisrael, the Jewish people, lefisha savlu ol hagolus b'Mitzrayim, since they underwent the burdens of the exile in Egypt and the servitude in Egypt, niftaru mitzar hamilchama, they became exempt from the suffering of war. Shahare asu milchamos im hakananim b'derech nes, because Bnei Yisrael fought the wars against the kings and the nations of Eretz Canaan in a miraculous way, below shum tsar, without any suffering. It wasn't like a normal war. It was without the casualties and the suffering of a normal war. V'chein asu kishiyotzu mitzrayim, and so too the same thing was true when the Bnei Yisrael left Egypt. Ki Hashem nilcham lohem b'Mitzrayim. As the pasuk says by Kriyas Yamsuf, Hashem fought the war against Mitzrayim. The Jews, as we pointed out previously in the beginning, Bnei Yisrael didn't fight a war against Egypt. Bnei Yisrael didn't fight battles against Mitzrayim. Hashem fought all the wars and defeated and brought about the destruction of Egypt and of the army of Egypt, the great army of Egypt. Hashem did all of that. V'lochein, and therefore Omar, Hashem says in the Medrash Rabbah, as quoted in the Medrash Rabbah, Milchemes Paro ata roeh, v'i ata roeh v'chuli. The war against Paro you will see, but you will not see the war against the kings. So let's pause here for a moment. Because the Zera Shimshon has explained to us that the suffering in Egypt was intimately connected with the Jewish people being able to conquer and inherit and take over the land of Canaan, because of that connection, we now can answer the first question that the Zera Shimshon posed, which is, why did the Medrash Rabbah connect two things that seem to be completely unrelated? And when Hashem, according to Medrash Rabbah, said to Moshe, you'll see what happens to Paro, but you won't see what happens to the 31 kings. Well, now we totally understand that. Hashem was saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, you should have fully understood the fact that the suffering in Egypt that the Jewish people underwent and had to undergo was necessary for them to inherit the land of Eretz Yisrael and be able to conquer it from the 31 kings. And not only that, but to be able to leave Egypt without fighting against the Egyptian army, and to be able to conquer the land of Eretz Canaan in a miraculous way without having the normal losses and suffering and deaths and misery of a war, of a milchama. You, Moshe, should have understood that. So the two things are very connected. Zera Shimshon continues, Aval adayin chova aleinu lahavin hatam v'haspara shel Moshe. But we are obligated to try to understand Moshe's mindset, Moshe's thought process, that the Zera Shimshon described as one which he says it seems impossible to say this. Chas v'sholom, we should say Moshe didn't appreciate Eretz Yisrael, but tzarech lomar. But it seems like we have to say that. So the Zera Shimshon says we must explain Moshe's thought process in a better way, in a clearer way. V'chilo hayu yodea kama gedola kedushas haaretz. Did Moshe not know how great was the holiness of the land of Eretz Yisrael? The kama hi chashuva, and how incredibly important Eretz Yisrael is? Did he not know that? The Nira Lomar, it appears that we should say, Lefisha Moshe haya mishevet Levi. Moshe was a member of the tribe of Levi. The Shevet Levi lo savlu ol hagolus b'Mitzrayim. And the tribe of Levi did not undergo servitude in the land of Mitzrayim. This is based on a chazal that we see in many places, that Shevet Levi were not forced, they were not enslaved, they were not forced to undergo slavery in Egypt. All of the other tribes were, but Shevet Levi was considered, so to speak, like the clergy of Bnei Yisrael, and therefore they did not have to do slave labor. And Moshe was a member of Shevet Levi, and therefore he and his brother Aaron and the other members of Shevet Levi were not forced to perform slave labor. The Moshe Pirush Rashi, as Rashi explains, al pasuk, on the pasuk, luchu l'sivlo seichem. Paro said to Moshe and Aaron, go to your burdens, Ayin Sham, and look there. That Rashi, that reference to Rashi is when Paro says to Moshe and Aaron, luchu l'sivlo seichem, leave my palace and go back to your burdens. Rashi says, don't think that this word burdens is being used in its normal sense to mean the slave labor that the rest of the Jewish people were doing. It can't mean that, because Shevet Levi wasn't enslaved, as the Zera Shimshon just pointed out. So Rashi says, so therefore, what did Paro mean to Moshe and Aaron when he said, go back to your burdens? He meant go back to the work that they do at home, go back to whatever they do on a normal day, whatever their normal jobs was, whatever their normal burdens were at home. Maybe it meant housework, maybe it meant painting the garage, whatever it is that their wife wanted them to do, mowing the lawn, whatever things that they normally had to do. Rashi says that must be what Paro meant when he said, L'chu l'sivlo seichem, go back to your burdens, because Rashi says Paro would never have said, go back to your slave labor. Paro knew, just like everyone in Egypt knew, that Shevet Levi, that the tribe of Levi who did not do slave labor, were not compelled to perform slave labor. That's what Rashi points out, and that is, Zera Shimshon brings it because it supports exactly what he's saying. Ucheneged zeh, and corresponding to this fact that the tribe of Levi did not do slave labor, lo notlu chelek ba'aretz, they did not take a portion of the land of Eretz Yisrael. They did not receive a nachala, they did not receive land in Eretz Yisrael. All the other tribes received major portions of Eretz Yisrael, and that was their inheritance, and it was divided up to all of the families of the tribes, and they were able to pass that on of fathers to sons and then to grandsons and so forth and so on. And so all of the Shvatim, all of the tribes except Shevet Levi had that, but Shevet Levi did not receive a major portion of land in order for them to live on and to work. The Shevet Levi, Hayayoser Choshev Mikol Ashvatim, and Shevet Levi was considered more important than all of the other tribes. Sheligiono Shel Melechu. Shevet Levi is referred to as the legion of Hashem. When we study certain incidents in Chumash, when we recollect and think about certain incidents in Chumash, we remember that Shevet Levi stood out for its special devotion and commitment to Hashem. For example, after the Chet HaEgel and other times, we see that they had a special commitment and dedication to Hashem. And of course, that the reward for that was their living around and working in the Mishkan. And all of the different avodos that were involved in carrying the different parts of the Mishkan when Bnei Yisrael traveled in the Midbar. So they were the Legiono Shel Hashem. Shevet Levi was the tribe that was closest to Hashem in that sense. V'haya Moshe sover, and so because of these things, Moshe thought, she'im zchus Yerushas ha'aretz hu kol kach choshuv. If the merit of inheriting Eretz Yisrael is so important, lispol aleha tsar hagolos, that it makes it worthwhile to undergo the pain and suffering of being in servitude in Egypt, in exile in Egypt. Lama nigru shevet Levi midover chashuv kazeh. Why was the tribe of Levi taken away, subtracted, removed from something so important? Moshe, a member of Shevet Levi, is struggling with understanding how can it be if experiencing the Golus is the thing that allows the Jewish people to ultimately inherit the land of Eretz Yisrael, which is so important and so essential, then how can Shevet Levi, the tribe closest to Hashem, the special legion of Hashem, how can they not ultimately get a portion of the land of Israel because they aren't forced to do slave labor in Mitzrayim? That doesn't add up. That doesn't compute in Moshe's mind. That's the question that Moshe is struggling with. V'chi b'shvil sha'ani zochar hifsadati. And is it because I'm a man, that's why I'm losing out? This is a very cryptic phrase, and I invite everyone and encourage everyone to help me. I'm going to translate it in terms of what I think it means, but if anyone would like at the end to explain it in a different way or research it and post it on the WhatsApp, that would be wonderful. I believe what it means is, Moshe says, and because I'm a member of Shevet Levi, because I'm a citizen, a part of Shevet Levi, is that why I'm going to lose out the zechus of ultimately having a nachla on Eretz Yisrael, like all of Shevet Levi? All of us are going to lose out just because we're members of Shevet Levi. Is that a reason that we shouldn't ultimately have a nachla on inheritance in Eretz Yisrael? Elevadai tzorech lomar. But Moshe Rabbeinu concludes, according to the Zera Shimshon, that he must say, she'ein zeh zechus liYisrael, that the suffering in Egypt is not ultimately worth the merit, the Jewish people's merit to get Eretz Yisrael is not worth the suffering in Egypt. Umishum hachi, and because of this, Omar, that's why he said to Hashem, Lama hareosa, why are you causing the Jewish people to suffer? So let's pause here. I think this is obviously an example of something where if the Zera Shimshon or another Meforish hadn't said it, we would never say it. But the Zera Shimshon is clearly saying that Moshe Rabbeinu's thought process was, if Shevet Levi was excluded from slave labor, as the Zera Shimshon established they were, and therefore they didn't get a chelek, didn't get an inheritance in the land of Eretz Yisrael, then it must be that whole process of undergoing slave labor and therefore getting a portion in the land of Eretz Yisrael is not so chashuv. It's not so important. It's not so essential, because if it was so important and it was so essential, then how could Shevet Levi, the Shevet closest to Hashem, be excluded from all of that? That was Moshe's thought process, and according to the Zera Shimshon, that is why Moshe Rabbeinu had the temerity, so to speak, had the chutzpah, so to speak, to say to Hashem, Lama Hariosa, why are you causing the Jewish people to suffer? Even though Hashem had already explained to Moshe the connection between the suffering and inheriting the land of Eretz Yisrael. So now let's continue. And afterwards, much later, when it came time for Moshe Rabbeinu to die, Nischavet Harbe, he beat with his davening, he beat, he so to speak, beat against the door with his davening kedei lavor bo, in order to cross over into land of Eretz Yisrael, bilvad, only. Ulir osa, and to see it, afilu belonatilas chelik ba, even though he would not get a portion in the land. When Moshe Rabbeinu davened to Hashem to go into Eretz Yisrael, he wasn't saying, I want to go in and receive my own piece of land like every other member of Bnei Yisrael except Shevet Levi. That wasn't what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying. Moshe Rabbeinu understood no matter what, as a member of the tribe of Levi, he would never have that. However, he was just saying to Hashem, let me just go in and be in the land of Israel. Let me go in and see the land of Israel, even if I don't get a chelek, even if I don't receive a portion. As the pasuk says, Moshe says, let me cross over and see the land, not let me cross over and inherit the land. Let me cross over and just see the land. And therefore Hashem said, and this goes back all the way to the quote in the Medrash Rabbah, therefore Hashem said to him, Milchama zu ataroeh. You will see. Moshe, you're talking about seeing the land of Israel. So now let me respond. You will see what happens to Paro. Abal iyataroeh, but you will not see what happens in the defeat of the Bnei Yisrael conquering the 31 kings, the 31 Canaanite kings. V'chulei. Shelo tavor ba, because you will not cross over into Eretz Yisrael. K'dichsiv, as the pasuk says, I will show it to you with your eyes, and there you will not cross over. Hashem says to Moshe, you will be able to go up and look in, peer and see the land, but you will not cross over to see the land. You will not actually enter the land of Eretz Canaan, Eretz Yisrael. And all of the pleading that Moshe did, in order to enter the land, all of the pleas and the davening that Moshe did, they are a sign and a symbol al shevach haaretz, on the praise of Eretz Yisrael. In other words, Moshe came around to fully now understand the incredible importance and the essential nature of Eretz Yisrael to the destiny of the Jewish people and to the lives of Bnei Yisrael. And so all of his pleading goes to show us and to be a symbol forever for us of the importance, the chashivas of Eretz Yisrael. K'de'isa b'Yalkut Reuveni, as it states in the Yalkut Reuveni, al pasuk atasira, on one of the psukim we read in the beginning about now you will see, v'chulei, etc. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe, Kasafti olecha she'ata chacham, I have written about you that you are a wise man. Va'ata omer chein, and you, a wise man, a brilliant man, you say what you said, meaning you say to me, Lama hariosa, why are you causing the Jewish people to suffer? You say that, Moshe. Chayecha, by your life, yesh lecha leda, you will know, ulehodia, and you will make known, tov, the good, acharisan shel Yisrael, the ultimate benefit that will come to the Jewish people in the end, from the beginning that I gave them in Egypt, meaning you, Moshe, yourself will fully understand that the suffering that the Jewish people underwent in Egypt was more than justified by the benefit, the eternal benefit of being able to come into Eretz Yisrael, conquer the land, inherit the land, and live there. And the Zera Shimshon says, V'zeh medrash tamua. This a statement in the Yalkut Ruveni is hard to understand, meaning it would be hard to understand if not for what the ideas that the Zera Shimshon has developed, as he goes on to explain now and put the final touches on his ideas. Aval ha'inyan hu, but the answer to all of this, the understanding of all of this is the Beperik Tesvav de Shabbos in the 15th parak of Masechta Shabbos. Amrinon, we say, Shehatalmid Chacham, if you have a person who's a real, true Talmid Chacham, and the Gemara over there discusses what's the definition of a true Talmid Chacham, a true Torah scholar, Mitzuvin b'nei ha'ir la'asos malachto, then the people of this person's town are obligated to do his work for him. A person who is a true Talmid Chacham, who's totally devoted and committed to the study of Torah and the teaching of Torah and the spiritual needs of the community, the people of that community should do whatever labor is necessary so that he does not have to do that labor, which would take away from his Torah study and his spiritual activities. Umizeh nistora svaras Moshe. And with this fact, this idea brought to us in the Gemara in Masechta Shabbos, we can contradict, we see the flaw in Moshe Rabbeinu's reasoning. She'adarabba, it was just the opposite from what Moshe Rabbeinu thought. When Moshe Rabbeinu said, if Shevet Levi is being excluded from labor and therefore excluded from an inheritance in the land of Israel, then it must mean that Eretz Yisrael is not so important. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu thought, according to the Zera Shimshon. But the Zera Shimshon now says we understand, based on the Gemara in Masechta Shabbos, that Moshe Rabbeinu's reasoning was incorrect. She'adarabba, just the opposite. Lefisha shevet Levi ligyono shel melech. It is precisely because the tribe of Levi is the legion of Hashem and so close to Hashem and so dedicated to Hashem. The Chsiv and the Pasuk writes about shevet Levi, Yoru mishpatecha leYaakov. They will teach your laws to the Jewish people. V'soiras Yisrael, and they will teach your Torah to Bnei Yisrael. The Od Chsiv, and it's also written in the Torah. According to their mouth of the Shevet Levi will be the solution to quarrels. They will help decide quarrels between people and any tsaras, any plagues of leprosy that strike people. They will be the ones to deal with these problems and teach what people should do according to the Torah. Kol Yisrael mitzuvin lasos melachtam. It is because of that the Jewish people did the slave labor in Egypt and Shevet Levi was exempted. That's why it wasn't just Stam that Shevet Levi was exempted. It's Dafka because of what this Gemara and Masechta Shabbos is teaching us. Because Shevet Levi was devoted to studying and teaching the Torah and devoted to the spiritual needs of Bnei Yisrael, that's why they weren't forced to work in Mitzrayim. And therefore, the portion of the fields in Eretz Yisrael that would have gone to them, nasnuhu liYisrael, they were given to the rest of the Jewish people. Because Shevet Levi would not have been able to work the land. Shevet Levi, as we're seeing, was so devoted to Torah study and teaching Torah and the spiritual needs of the people that they would not have been able to go into the fields and work the land. So therefore the lands that they would have received were given to the rest of the Jewish people. And after this arrangement took place, after the Jews were settled in Eretz Yisrael, the Jewish people gave the members of Shevet Levi Meiser, tithe, 1/10 of their crops. And so that's what the Levium, instead of having their own land to work, they received Meiser, they received produce and crops from the rest of Bnei Yisrael. The in hachinami, and of course it's true, we concede she'eretz Yisrael hi chashuva ad me'od. Moshe Rabbeinu came to understand and concede that of course Eretz Yisrael is the ultimate in chashivas, the ultimate in importance and in holiness in the world. Moshe kodim moso, and Moshe before his death, hodia chashivusam shel Yisrael be'eretz Yisrael. Moshe made known to everyone the importance of having the Jewish people be'eretz Yisrael, be in the land of Israel, kenizkar la'el, as has been mentioned before. Vizehu, and now this last point is kind of parenthetical. It's just a side point to wrap up a loose thread. V'zehu she'amru, and this that they said previously in the Yalkut Ruveni, Chasafti Olecha she'ata chacham, Hashem says, I wrote about you that you are a chacham. So the Zera Shimshon knows, of course, and we probably suspect that there's no pasuk in the Torah where Hashem says that Moshe is a chacham. It says lots of things about Moshe, but it doesn't say he's a chacham. So what did that mean when it says, I wrote about you that you're a chacham? This is based on a pasuk in Mishlei, and here's the pasuk: Ir giborim ola chacham. There was a city of mighty men, and a chacham, a wise man, went up to that city. Zeh Moshe. This is a reference to Moshe, and that pasuk in Mishlei, the word chacham, the wise man who went up to the city, is a reference to Moshe. The Yored Oz Mivtecha. And he brought down the strength of their trust, the strength that they trusted in. So according to the Medrash, that pasuk is a reference to the fact that Moshe went up on Har Sinai to the city of the Malachim, so to speak, to the Shamayim, the place where the Malachim are, the supernal realm. And Moshe Rabbeinu was able to bring down from there the Torah, which the Malachim didn't want to come down, according to Chazal, to human beings, to mere mortals who are so imperfect and so flawed. But Moshe Rabbeinu was able to do that. And so that pasuk in Mishlei that talks about a chacham going up into a city of mighty people and bringing down their strength, that's a reference to Moshe as the chacham who brought down the Torah from Shamayim. We see here that the Zera Shimshon has not only answered his three questions, but he has given us a much, much deeper understanding of the dialogue between Hashem and Moshe. And whereas before we might have not put too much significance on Moshe's comment, Loma Hariosa, we might have thought Hashem, that Moshe was saying, Hashem, not only are things not getting better, but they're getting worse, which is certainly an understandable question. But the Zera Shimshon says it's much, much deeper than that. And once he was able to explain what was going on in that dialogue, now then we're able to understand the piece in the Medrash Rabbah that we started with, and also the other pieces in Midrashim that the Zera Shimshon brought along the way. Yasher koch to everyone for participating, and Amir Hashem, God willing, we look forward to learning the Zera Shimshon together next week.